Rowdy reviews Highlander, the Source. Now available to all Rowdy C Patreon supporters. What?! Okay, let's get this out of the way first, people. You all hopefully know that I have long been against the idea of entertainment producers believing that everything has to be made exclusively for one demographic one way or another. I have always believed that making movies, shows, games, and other media for everyone is not only possible, but something we need to see a lot more of. But even still, I know that some things out there only make sense being made for one age group, and Highlander is on the top of that list. We are talking about a film and TV franchise that basically is meant to satisfy the desires of people who take a guilty pleasure in seeing a battle royale scenario of people having to kill each other until one survives, with the added guilty bonus of them having to do it through swordplay. Make no mistake about it, Highlander is not for kids. Which puts this show around the absolute top of the list of what the hell were they thinking shows that were made around the 1990s, adapted from movies and other franchises. And let's not have any doubt about who this show was made for. The Highlander animated series originally aired on the USA Network in 1994, which, yes, was the same time that they aired Duckman. But Duckman aired at around a time slot similar to what Adult Swim would be now. From what I've been able to gather, the Highlander cartoon aired on Sunday mornings, which is one of the time periods known for kids programming. No getting around it. This show was made for young audiences. And I guess part of me does get a little chuckle out of the fact that they tried to make all these kidified versions of Rambo and James Bond and RoboCop and whatnot, because either they knew that kids had snuck into theaters to see the original movies anyway, or they had hoped watching these cartoons would draw them to the movies, thus pissing off who knows how many Mrs. Lovejoys out there. At least they were more upfront about poisoning the innocence of youth than the tobacco companies were, with less actual damage to their physical health. But with all that said, was this show still worth all the trouble they went to? Let's find out as TV Timeline Month finally concludes with the Highlander animated series. The pilot episode starts off with apparently what happens when David Lynch and George Miller do magic mushrooms together and turn both their fever dreams into a cartoon.
Then Arak must find more, wherever he can. Send him to the Highlands.
And yeah, this whole thing is set after the Great Catastrophe. If this is like the Great Disaster that led to DC's Countdown, I'm bailing. Because every time Highlander is set in dystopia, it always works out so well. And of course it has the standard trope of, despite it being a dystopian society that has supposedly lost all of the world's natural resources, there is still the ability to construct a gigantic Star Wars level city and an army of tanks that the evil overlord uses to enforce his tyranny. And I was going to harp on why this evil city is in the middle of the freaking desert when there are clearly more sustainable lands elsewhere, as we see later. But I guess it does make some level of sense that those lands would be more barren because they have siphoned off most of the resources to build and operate this place. So I'm just gonna wonder where in the hell this city is actually located if they're able to travel from it to the Scottish Highlands by ground vehicle. So we then cut to the Highlands where we meet Quentin Dundee. Okay, are we in Scotland or Australia? And his little sister, who, yes, will sadly be a regular character because you just know that anyone wanting to watch this show wanted to see a whiny little girl always tagging along with our hero. Quentin tells his sister about the nightmares he has from an incident that happened back when he was a hobbit and ran into... No, it can't be him. Anyway, they return to find the army ravaging their village and taking all the people hostage, and his mother refuses to run away, saying it's his destiny to stay and fight, which apparently he's had no train to do so this is gonna turn out very nicely for him, right? Ah!
The lesson's finished, child.
Yeah, who didn't see that coming?
No!
At last! 700 years waiting for this moment. Quite a long time, I have to say.
It almost wasn't worth coming back from the dead for again. Seriously, why is Ramirez in this show? I mean, at least in the second movie, they had little choice but to bring him back because Christopher Lambert demanded he be able to work with Sean Connery again. And at least there they actually showed him getting revived. Here it's like the creators said, wait, there was a character in this franchise that was played by Connery? Yeah, just throw him in there! Which of course makes even less sense when Connery doesn't even provide his voice!
You are no Dundee. You are the last of the MacLeods.
And you knew all of this because...
Do you know your name, child?
I am Quentin MacLeod, and I am not a child.
A boomerang! Seriously, when did the Highlands move to Down Under?
Well, if your intentions are to fight, then fight like a Highlander.
A Japanese sword? Why would a Scotsman? Just shut up, no one's questioned it before. So in 700 years, the term Highlander has gone from simply being the nickname of a couple of immortals because of where they were originally from, to being the term used to describe the chosen one that's going to save the world. I was going to make a joke about it being the result of the whole Aramon arc, except for the little detail that this series premiered about 5 years before that storyline aired.
I am Don Vincente Marino Ramirez, Grandee of Spain.
Although I'm actually Egyptian, and don't ask why I sound more like a Scotsman than you do. So now we get to the backstory of what supposedly happened. After the Great Catastrophe, and yes, we will find out what that was, all of the remaining immortals agreed to give up the game in order to work together and rebuild society. Except that one of them, named Cortan, wasn't so into the plan there. And thus Cortan declares that he is now officially the last immortal and thus wins the prize by default. And yet he doesn't just up and kill all the remaining immortals right then and there when they would be unwilling to defend themselves, and thus he would be completely the last immortal.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
Yeah, you know what? That to me is a more boneheaded move than all the other immortals vowing to never fight again. I mean, I do kind of understand why these Jeditors would not dare break their oath, even as Cortan's refusal ruins all their plans. Immortals are a superstitious lot. They refuse to fight on holy ground because they believe the one time it happened caused Vesuvius to blow. But Cortan clearly has no fears whatsoever. There is literally nothing stopping him from just slashing away at all their necks and being done with it, aside from him perhaps wanting to torment them further. And if that's not on the evil overlord list, it damn well should be. And by the way, no, at no point do they specifically say here that an immortal can only die by taking off his head. Which means that anyone watching this that hadn't seen the other movies or shows will be confused as heck as to what's going on, and the others are gonna get really upset at, well, we'll just wait and see. So yeah, basically this whole series is Mad Max meets Star Wars with maybe about 20% Highlander thrown in tops, and just enough of that to probably piss off all the Highlander fans who were gullible enough to tune in. For example, every actual beheading is shown completely off screen. I mean, I know we never saw an actual head come off in the live action show, but at least we saw a sword being swung. It's almost like making a show for kids that's supposed to be about people taking each other's heads off is going to have a lot of problems. Which is probably why they also throw in the little plot detail that you apparently can receive another Immortal's quickening by just having them pass it on to you. Jeez, why the hell did no one tell Connor McLeod that before he begged Duncan to take his head? Oh wait, in this series it was Cortan who killed Connor McLeod. Well, now that makes perfect sense now, doesn't it? I mean, we want to make sure we drive every single Highlander fan into a frothing rage from watching this show, now don't we? It does look like the show is trying to tell a cohesive story arc about how Quentin needs to obtain the skill and knowledge to be able to defeat Cortan, while they do reveal details as to the backstory of this apocalyptic world. We eventually learn that the Great Catastrophe was when a meteorite struck Earth and caused all the nuclear missiles on the planet to launch, mashing together the two most used disaster movie scenarios into one. I mean, geez, wouldn't we have fail-safes for that? What, are our nuclear systems being run on floppy disks or something?
60 Minutes shocked to find 8-inch floppies drive nuclear deterrents.
Why does reality have to ruin my jokes? It doesn't help, though, that while many episodes have plot elements that make it look like they contribute to an overall story arc, they still have little to no connection to one another. New characters are introduced almost every episode, only to not be seen again until many episodes later, if at all. In the final episode of the show's first season, Quentin learns from Ramirez's teacher that he must receive his quickening to be able to defeat Cortan, but will only be deemed worthy of it once he receives that of all the other Janitors. At least I think that was the finale of the first season, because the episode order posted on the Highlander wiki site is of course completely different from how they're listed on the DVD set that I obtained. And yes, this is a legit copy I own. It was distributed by Genius Entertainment, a company that was eventually merged with A Squared Entertainment, which was founded by former Deke co-founder Andy Hayward. Sometimes learning about the history of these distribution companies is harder than researching the shows themselves. So yes, there are a lot of episodes in the second season where Janitors pass on their quickening to Quentin, but the knowledge they supposedly give isn't brought up in the next episode most of the time. And like I said, the episode order is all over the place from where I researched it. I think the final episode was the one titled Countdown. Okay, now this show is literally trolling me about a comic that came out 12 years later, where Cortan gains control of an old missile base and just starts nuking everything to try and force the people to turn over Quentin. So Quentin and Ramirez sneak in and sabotage the missiles so they'll blow up the base, but in trying to escape, Quentin finds himself in the long-awaited one-on-one confrontation with Cortan.
You have lost, McLeod. In the end, there can be only one.
We got that line in, so this proves this is a Highlander show! Nope, of course it was all a cop-out, because not only does Quentin survive, but clearly Cortan does as well. And Quentin doesn't even bother to take his head here, because apparently he's more Batman than Highlander. All to try and hope for a third season that never happened, because this show got its head taken off after just 2 seasons, and good riddance to it. Watching this series, I soon thought of another cartoon show made by a French studio based on another popular franchise, The New Adventures of He-Man. And yeah, this show has a lot of the same problems, as it looks like the creators used the names of an already established franchise in name only to try and sell their own story. That would be bad enough, but the episodes as a whole seem to have little to no cohesion with one another when it's clear they should have, and the major plot elements that do exist are ones that even back then had been seen so many times before and come off as just ripping off other more well-known works. I had the DVDs of this show thanks to a generous fan, but I think it used to be on Hulu before it got pulled from the site this very month. There's some irony for ya. So yes, overall for TV Timeline this month, we have seen that there have been a number of bad entries in the Highlander franchise that spun off from a movie that seemed to have a finality to it and thus shouldn't have been spun off. But when you really think about it, why do people complain about it so much? Let's be honest, the very concept of Highlander is kind of stupid. The original creators left themselves open to plot holes and chances for such extensions of the franchise to continue. By refusing to explain details like how and why the Immortals and the game came to be, it leaves a lot of questions like just how would it be possible to know that one is the very last Immortal, because what would stop another one from eventually born and ruining the whole thing? Which is something they actually covered in the second movie. Someone suggested to me that Highlander is like a fairy tale, and if that's the case, hey, fairy tales get retellings, adaptations, and extensions all the time. Sometimes those retellings don't come out as well as the original, but sometimes they actually do. I'm not saying no one should like the original Highlander, just pointing out that it's still a ridiculous concept from the beginning, and thus it leading to extensions that are just as, if not more ridiculous, was inevitable. Highlander is a stupid concept, but I've said plenty of times that stupid can still be entertaining. Heck, I'm sure all of you have been entertained by things that are far stupider. And this didn't happen on Spoonie's Highlander Watch because...
Rowdy Sea of the Clan Moor, I've come for your head.
Life on the internet is always full of excitement, isn't it?
I have deduced that you are the greatest of them all, and once I take your quickening, I shall have the power to dominate all walks of life!
Yeah, you can shut your pie hole right now. Look, whoever it is that sent you, or to be more accurate, created you, obviously did some very piss-poor research in trying to get me to think that you would be an immortal here to take my head. See, if I was an immortal and you were too, I would have sensed you coming in here. What I do know, however, is that since the electronic sensors I have built into this place didn't pick you up breaking into my home, I can therefore deduce that technically you do not exist. Which means that not only would I have no problem using this to its full capacity on you, but I actually have a better idea, and rather than using this, I'll just use this instead.